All right, and welcome back to the 2019 Cannabis Industry Summit. Joining us now is Andrew Brisbo. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
It's pretty exciting, right?
I think it's a great event. You know, it's always encouraging to see the passion of the people that want to be involved in this industry. And typically, I hear good news that people who want to operate in the industry want to do it the right way. So I think it's incumbent upon me to get out there and talk to them about what the right way is when it comes to running a compliant operation.
So when the governor asked you to do this job, were you like, I don't know, or were you like, yeah, let's do this thing?
I think it was more, I was already sort of doing the job. So if the governor didn't ask me to do it, it would have been sort of embarrassing that I'd spent the past 2 years getting ready for it and then didn't get offered the job. But I'm excited for the opportunity.
So when you talk to just regular people who aren't in the industry, what are the questions they ask you about recreational marijuana?
I get a lot of questions about what's allowed in terms of possession. I got asked the question today, does this mean I can just walk down the street and smoke a joint now? And I think there's a lot of confusion what legalization really means. And I think I get a lot of questions as well from employers about what it means for drug testing policies and what they can or can't do, as well as property owners and landlords about what they have to allow in homes that they own. So I think I go out and speak to anyone that's interested in hearing about it because I think it's an issue that is unavoidable now. I think everyone needs to understand what the legal infrastructure looks like when it comes to both laws and regulations in the state.
I guess it'll be better when we get to the point where everything's in place and it is legal, because right now people don't know, but soon enough people will know.
Yeah, I think we're still in a transitional period, and once there's access through regulated facilities, I think it makes it much cleaner and easier to understand for the general population that they'll know where they can go to get products that have been tested and they can be assured are free from certain contaminants, and it reduces risk of consuming those products.
What's kind of surprising to me is that we're still so new into medical marijuana. I mean, it's like we're almost not even quite established in that arena. And now we're going to throw recreational on top of it. It seems like it's going to be kind of confusing for a little bit.
I think it's going to take a bit of time to grow to the point where the regulated industry can meet demand. And I often say when I do go out and do speeches and presentations that we were just getting ourselves established in issuing licenses in the medical market, and then sure enough, the voters went and gave us this new task to take on. But I think we were ready for the challenge. We still learned a lot from the first round, but I agree with you that when it comes to understanding, particularly at the sort of citizen or consumer level, there's a lot of education that still needs to take place. I think there's a lot of science that needs to support, you know, if you're going to use cannabis products, what's a responsible way to do it to avoid any acute issues or any long-term exposure issues as well. And I think that science needs to be there so that consumers can make informed choices.
So what are the things really consumers need to pay the closest attention to? Especially if you're new to cannabis, you're cannabis curious, as they're saying.
Yeah. Oh, I think if you're going to consume for a medical purpose, it's still important to consult with a physician about what types of products to use on what schedule and what's appropriate for treating a certain condition. There are a lot of different strains of marijuana products, and if consumers make choices that aren't in line with treating the condition that they're seeking to treat, they may have a bad experience, and it may not help with that condition either. And I think in terms of adult use consumers, it's important to consider sourcing materials from a known and regulated source so they can ensure that it's been tested.
And from people who want to get into the business, what are the things they need to know? So one, they don't come in and lose a ton of money, or two, they don't come in and do it wrong and find out they violated some law.
I think it's important to understand the market factors in the regulatory program and to understand that the issuance of a state license isn't a guarantee of running a successful business. So you have to know what the local regulations look like, that you're in a community that's supportive of you having a licensed operation, the qualifications for licensure, but then to have a strong business plan to understand the market factors that lead to being a successful business. This is an industry unlike any other. As we talked about tonight, banking relationships are challenging in this industry, and then the effective tax rate for a marijuana-related business is somewhere upwards of 70%. So to run a profitable business, I think you have to have very good planning and you have to understand all of those factors and make good decisions as a business person. I mean, running a business overall is challenging.
Right.
And in this industry, it's particularly challenging.
Because of all the extra regulations.
Well, the extra regulations, because it's illegal at a federal level still, you know, to have banking relationships and those tax rates, those can be killer. I was always worried about some of these businesses. The first year they were in business, when they had to pay that tax bill and they realized it was 70%, did they make good decisions and save the money necessary to pay those tax bills? I mean, that can be very challenging for a business to be successful.
So tell me about the economics of this industry for the state or for the taxpayers.
Yeah. So there's a 10% excise tax, and there's also sales tax in both the medical and the adult use markets. I mentioned tonight that we're trying to pay to have a market study done, an analysis of what that revenue ultimately looks like. Total market size, what sales will be, and therefore what the tax revenue will be. So as it gets distributed for roads and schools and counties and municipalities, they can have a better understanding of what that revenue is going to look like, and then they can determine how it's best utilized.
And how do the individual communities assess their own advantages economically if they've opted in or opted out?
I think so. A piece of that is the tax revenue distribution, which is, there are a lot of variables that go into that, so we want to help provide some guidance on what that's going to look like. And then the other economic impacts, such as property taxes, as well as job opportunities in the community, I think are important for municipalities to consider what that opportunity looks like so they can make informed choices.
And the state has no dog in the fight, so to speak, as to telling communities what they should or shouldn't do. It's their own choice.
I think we want to see we want to see that there's access to the regulated market, because ultimately that's, I think, in the best interest of consumers of products. But you're absolutely right that municipalities need to make the decisions that are best for them, and we want to be a resource to provide information on what we're doing at the state level so they can make good decisions.
So there is a concern then if you live in a rural area and you live a long way from a place that has opted in, then the black market still has a place to live and thrive.
Yeah, I think that consumers are going to get access to the products that they want. And if it's not available through the regulated market, they'll find it other ways, particularly through the illicit market. I think if municipalities don't allow facilities, we can still provide some access to regulated products through delivery services. So that's something that we allow under the administrative rules, and that can provide a mechanism for access. But ultimately, we want consumers to have access to tested products. That is critical.
Do you think the legalization of recreational marijuana will actually kind of open doors for a lot of people to walk through? Do you think there's a lot of people who just don't use marijuana because it's illegal? Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think a lot of the consumers that we will see accessing the regulated market are probably consumers regardless. I think potentially that if we can see that we can enhance consumer confidence in products through our testing protocols, through standards on manufacturing practices, that may encourage consumers to use those mechanisms to access products. And I think that's better than if they were to source them off the illicit market. I'm sort of fascinated with the way baby boomers are starting to dabble in CBD, which has no THC in it, but they're like, okay, well, there's no THC in it, so I'm now interested in this, and they're trying it, and they're trying different things, and even, people who I might have never thought would even consider it, they're like, well, let's see what the benefits are. Let's see what the upside of this is. Do you see that happening with the marijuana industry?
I think we do see consumers that have an interest. I think one of the things that I'm excited about with the ballot initiative is the opportunity to provide funding for FDA research studies in medicinal uses of cannabis products. And I think that's very important. All the evidence on the use of marijuana products as well as CBD products is largely anecdotal. There is one federally approved drug that's sourced from the cannabis plant. But I think there needs to be more research so that it's not just anecdotal, it's not just individual testimonials, but there's scientific data to support what types of products, what specific cannabinoids from the plant can be useful, and to treat what conditions and how it's done. I am an advocate for science, and to approach it either to prove or disprove a theory is still progress, but I think that research needs to be done. So will the state kind of let the market decide as people come into the business? If they don't run a good business, they'll fail because they didn't run a good business, just like every other industry? Or is there some responsibility to make sure that people who are in this industry do it right? Well, I think we want to see people do it right. They have to run compliant operations, but ultimately we will issue a license to anyone who qualifies, and to some degree their success or failure is based on their business practices. We do have some interesting market controls that may give the state greater control over how the market operates in the marijuana space than in other industries. But I think that's ultimately to ensure that there's some level of stability in these initial stages. And then as the market succeeds on its own merits, I think you'll see some of that pulled back and businesses can thrive as long as we'll restrict ourselves to a role that ensures consumer safety. That's ultimately what regulation is supposed to do.
How much has it helped that other states have gone before us? Have you been able to see where they've had hurdles or got in over their head maybe with what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I think it's been great to have collaborative partnerships with other states that are farther along. They have more mature markets to see what's been successful. And I think it's also been a good opportunity to see what issues are pressed in those states with more mature markets so that we can be out ahead of it. So for example, with social consumption, we knew that was a burgeoning issue in states with mature markets. So we were able to approach that right from the beginning. Instead of trying to let it happen organically and then rein it into a regulated environment, we just provided standards under which it could occur proactively.
Is there anything unique to the state of Michigan that is a benefit to this industry, or does it not really matter what state you're in?
Well, I think the benefit in Michigan is the ingenuity of the people in the industry and the interest in approaching related industries as well. So I think we see a lot of interest from post-secondary institutions. We have degree programs and study programs at both Northern Michigan and Lake Superior State that are sort of unique in the country. Yeah. We have research universities that we're trying to work with, in that economic study, as well as doing, training for physicians and things like that. I think there is opportunity in Michigan that might not exist in other states beyond just the industry of production and consumer sales. And I think Michigan can be a leader there. And in the industry overall, Michigan's got an excellent history of business both in the manufacturing and agricultural sectors, and this industry is an interesting confluence of those two sectors, so I think Michigan can be a leader there as well.
Does the legalization of recreational marijuana become sort of a recruiting tool for bringing young talent back to the state? Because people talk about the young talent leaving the state.
Well, I think that's possible. Ultimately, I'm a guy who works in government, and I keep my head down and stay in my lane. But, I think that the state of Colorado did see a lot of economic development, not just specific to the industry. So I think that potentially could play a factor.
It's an exciting time to be where you're at.
I think it's going to continue to be an exciting time for several years.
I can call it exciting. I don't have to wake up and do it every day.
It's still work, but I think both on behalf of myself and all the folks we have working at the MRA, we're excited to be a part of this.
All right, Andrew Brisbo, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
We'll be back with more of the 2019 Cannabis Industry Summit. Stay with us.